Good afternoon. I'll call to order our committee meeting. This is the committee meeting of the Housing Policy and Development Committee, a regularly scheduled meeting on June 12th, 2019. I'm Councilmember Cam Gordon, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by Council Members Goodman, Bender, and Schrader. We're a quorum of the committee so we can conduct our business. I expect other council members will be arriving soon. Welcome to everyone. There's 7 items on our agenda. We have 3 public hearings and land sales to consider, 1 consent item, and the remainder are discussion items. I'm going to move first with our consent item. This is a grant agreement with the American Indian Community Development Corporation for acquisition of 1500 Elliott Avenue. And I would like to amend this to also include a referral to the Ways and Means Committee, as is our common practice with these kinds of things. Would anybody like to pull that for discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. That motion carries. Then I would like to proceed with our 3 land sales. There's 3 land sales for us to consider. We have to have a public hearing and vote on each separately, but I think we're going to get an overview report on all 3 of them first from Mr. Ramadan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. We do have 3 land sales: 1326 Emerson Avenue North, 2635 Colfax Avenue North, and 2822 Emerson Avenue North. These sales are through the Minneapolis Homes program. Policies for the program were established by the City Council on December 11, 2015, and on February 10, 2017. Staff recommends the sale of 1326 Emerson Avenue North to A-Vision LLC for its appraised value of $20,000, subject to conditions. 2635 Colfax Avenue North to Wilson Molina for its appraised value of $55,000, subject to conditions, and 2822 Emerson Avenue North to Kit Provisit for $60,000, subject to conditions. Staff has continuously marketed these properties to an email listserv of now over 2,800 people, and a total of 18 applications were received for the 3 properties. Our recommendations are for the highest scoring offers received for each of the properties. We did have a neighborhood recommendation in 2 cases that are different than our recommendation. On 1326 Emerson, we had a recommendation that Northgate Development, Jamez Staples, be awarded the property. However, we did not receive a complete application that had the financial information that was needed for the application. In the case of 2822 Emerson, we had a recommendation for Taihan Development. And in that case, we had an owner-occupant, a person who had applied who would plan to be an owner-occupant who ranked slightly higher than Taihan Development did. CPED's construction management staff reviewed the scopes of work and estimates submitted by each applicant's builder and confirmed they are sufficient to meet the minimum construction standards of the program. Notification was provided to the Hawthorne neighborhood for 2635 Colfax and 2822 Emerson, and to the Northside Residents Redevelopment Council for 1326 Emerson on April 22nd, 2019. And as I mentioned, the recommendations that came from those neighborhoods was different than the staff recommendation. Kit Proviseth is here today for 2822 Emerson Avenue North. Wilson Molina was unable to attend, as well as Bruce Barron for A-Vision was unable to attend. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions. Okay. Thank you very much for the report. Mm-hmm. I'll open the public hearing. First, I'll ask if there's anybody here to speak on 2625 Colfax, and I know potentially not, because the buyer is not present. I suppose I could close that public hearing and then open the public hearing on the land sale at 1326 Emerson Avenue North. Is there someone here to speak on that? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and Council. First of all, I apologize. As you all probably saw in the Monday paper, I've been fighting this battle of a steep hill, trying to get some other things together, so I neglected to turn in the financials for the property when the application was due. However, I do have financials as well as some of the other permitting issues that I have run into with the other property to provide for you as evidence. The process through this rehab program isn't necessarily all that transparent through my other properties that I acquired through the city. When I initially purchased that property, I immediately pulled the permit, put on a roof, and they ran into all sorts of issues in terms of trying to get the other permits. This is in relation to another property that I've acquired from the city. But I would like to speak because I am going to live in this home.
Could you just introduce yourself so we
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm sorry. Jamez Staples, resident of North Minneapolis, 15th and Emerson. a block away from 1326. I currently occupy a duplex, which I own, and also want to stay in the neighborhood where I live, so I would like to live by this property for the purposes of living in it. As I mentioned, I have my documentation here because I guess the CPED went through the process, and I missed the deadline to bring in the financials, so I can provide this for you as evidence. Anybody need to see it?
I think maybe we want staff to see that after you're
Okay.
done testifying.
Okay, so I would like to purchase this home and hope that you all would take that into consideration opposed to Bruce Barron, who's a developer. Thank you.
So we have, all right, I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure. A-Vision LLC is the recommended purchasers. So is there anybody else who wants to speak on 1326 Emerson? Okay, then I'll close that public hearing. And I think I'll open the public hearing on 2822 Emerson Avenue North. Is there anybody here to speak on that property? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Kit Parusat. My bad. I live at 2749 Thomas Avenue North, and I've been working with RAM Construction for a few years. And it's thanks to RAM that I heard about the housing, the vacancy housing recycling program. And I'm very thankful and gracious, and sorry, I'm kind of nervous.
That's all right.
I'm very thankful and gracious to the opportunity you've given me to be a homeowner, and that's all.
And so your plan is to purchase the property, develop it, or fix it, and then
Yeah,
move
for
in?
my family moving. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Then I'll close the public hearing and see if there's any questions or comments from committee members. Seeing none, then I feel inclined to move the staff recommendation. I understand there's some confusion about 1326 Emerson Avenue North, so I'd encourage staff to maybe check in with Mr. Staples and see some more details on that situation. Maybe I could just ask a question of Mr. Ramadan. I'm just a little bit, it looks like we have A-Vision LLC as the first preferred buyer. And
That's
then the
correct.
second preferred buyer is Joseph Jackson and Shannon Sanford.
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Staples wasn't necessarily one of the top two.
Only because of not having those financials in, that we were not able to consider it as a complete application.
And if you saw those, would that change your recommendation?
It's very probable.
Would you recommend that we not make a decision on that one today and we wait, or?
I would say it's up to the committee, but we would not have a problem with that.
Well, that seems like a reasonable thing to do then. Why don't we move forward? So I'll make a motion and we'll see what the committee thinks, but I would like to move to approve the staff recommendation for number 1 and 3. That's the land sale at 2635 Colfax, and at, why don't we take them one at a time? So first I'll move the land sale at 2635 Colfax Avenue North to Wilson Molina. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Then I would like to move the land sale at 1326 Emerson Avenue North forward without recommendation at this time, so that staff has an opportunity to work out the details and clarify their final recommendation. Are there any questions on that? Seeing none, then, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And then on the land sale at 2822 Emerson Avenue North, I would like to move approving the staff recommendation to sell the property to Kit Pravaseth. Any comments or questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. Thank you very much. We got through that so far, and we can hopefully resolve things by the council meeting. Now we'll move on to our discussion items. The first item is having to do with program guideline amendments to our Home Ownership Works program. And Ms. Coleman is going to present on this. And we've made some, I think, potentially positive changes to this fairly popular program. And I just want to welcome you here. I think this might be the first time you've presented to the committee. No? Okay. Well, good to have you back.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. My name is Erica Coleman. I am Senior Project Coordinator with CPID Housing Policy and Development. And today I bring you proposed changes for the Homeownership Works Hal Program Guidelines. So the Homeownership Works, also known as Hal Program, provides project gap and affordability gap funding assistance to rehabilitate or construct new housing for affordable homeownership. The program, which is primarily funded through federal home dollars, was originally approved in 1990, and the program guidelines were last updated and approved by City Council in 2009. Completed projects are sold to owner-occupants at or below 80% area median income at a sales price not to exceed 95% of area median purchase price. HAL program funding may be used for project gap assistance, which are funds that help cover the difference of the total development cost and the sales price, and affordability gap assistance, which are funds to help cover the difference between the sales price and what a home buyer can afford to pay on their first mortgage. As the HAL program is primarily funded through federal home dollars, there are requirements prescribed by HUD for a minimum affordability period based on the amount of affordability gap assistance provided. The affordability gap assistance offered is available at a zero interest, 30-year deferred, due upon sale loan. On November 24th, 2018, the City Council approved 9 nonprofit entities as program developers and delegated authority to the CPID Director to create an annual list of HAL program developers based on the following criteria through a request for qualifications process: experience successfully completing a similar project in the City of Minneapolis and selling to home buyers at or below 80% area median income within the last 2 years, current experience and familiarity with the use of public funding to construct housing, current experience and familiarity with Minneapolis civil rights requirements, small and underutilized business compliance in Section 3, as well as affirmative action plans, sufficient capacity to finance and complete single-family development projects, capacity of the developer and/or their agent to perform property selection, buyer outreach, marketing, rehabilitation, construction, and income qualification verification of potential home buyers. The developer cannot be an owner of a property that is registered vacant building on the City of Minneapolis Section 249 list, tax delinquent property, or property with significant code or rental license violations, unless the property is currently in the process of being rehabilitated in compliance with the restoration agreement or has a similar solution that is actively being implemented. When a project application is received, the developer cannot have an uncured default with the City of Minneapolis restoration agreement and/or redevelopment contract. All property developed through the HAL program is publicly marketed for sale. According to the local market update by Minneapolis area realtors, the median sales price of a single-family home has increased by 6.3%, and the average sales price has increased by 5.4% compared to the market at this time last year. Staff is requesting the proposed HAL program changes to more closely align the program with similar City of Minneapolis programs, as well as the 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The proposed changes will help the city address goals of the 2040 Comp Plan, including meeting the changing needs of residents by producing different types of housing with varying unit sizes and levels of affordability throughout Minneapolis. Staff used the Minneapolis Homes Development Assistance Program as a guide for developing this criteria. The recommended changes achieve several goals: expanding types of homes that can be created through HAL funding, providing deeper affordability assistance to home buyers below 80% area median income, clarifying procedures to align with requirements of similar funding programs and reduce complexity for consumers and staff, and encouraging the stabilization of households through homeownership. Staff is proposing the HAL program goal as to provide and sustain affordable owner-occupied 1 to 4 unit housing for low and moderate income households throughout Minneapolis and reduce racial disparities in homeownership. Staff is also proposing that eligible property include 1 to 4 unit housing where at least 1 unit will be owner occupied, that the eligible location is all of Minneapolis, that eligible developers are able to apply through the request of qualification process, that are a governmental entity, registered Minnesota business, for-profit or nonprofit, in good standing, and that the property status of a project to be included in the Hal program is a vacant or occupied property with a focus on stabilization. Staff is proposing aligning the availability of project gap assistance and affordability gap assistance funding with other city programs. That would allow for up to $70,000 of project gap assistance on a one-unit project and a minimum of $1,000 to $37,500 of affordability gap assistance based on need. The range that is proposed is to allow unused project gap funds to be used for affordability gap assistance to help the owner-occupied purchaser. The combined total investment for a one-unit project would be $80,000. For a 2 to 4 unit project, the gap assistance would be up to $95,000, an affordability gap assistance of $1,000 to $37,500 based on need, for a combined investment of up to $105,000 for a 2 to 4 unit project. Neighborhoods were notified about the proposed changes, asked to provide feedback, and invited to participate in an information and feedback gathering session that was held on May 23rd at Sabathani Community Center. We did receive some comments from that feedback and information session. And the comments that we received is that it could be improved if it was allowed for a lease with option to buy, contract for deed, and considerations for rent amounts. What they said additional information could be used was rent restrictions for more than one unit, for buildings that are more than one unit, and methods for controlling rents in a 2 to 4 unit building, and condo buildings to allow for affordability. We also received additional comments that reference the comparison of for-profit entities and nonprofit entities and their history of doing work with the City of Minneapolis in Minneapolis Homes Development Assistance, and what was the rate of home buyers of color that were able to participate and at what income. Do we have any questions?
Councilmember Schrader.
Yes, thanks so much for this. Just had a question with the amount going up, or what are the numbers? How many kind of developments are we expecting to serve? Is that going down? I guess that's the question.
It could go up. It's definitely a range because it's dependent upon the amount that the developers are looking to use. So we usually have an investment at this time of around $50,000 of project gap assistance per project and $14,999 for affordability gap, with the option to be able to use unused project gap assistance for affordability gap. There could be an increase in production.
Okay, thanks for that. My second question is just on kind of leverage. I mean, as we're a gap financer, are we seeing other funds go up as well in the county or nationally?
I'd have to check.
Okay.
I mean, they definitely leverage. I mean, that's the whole process of constructing affordable housing, is that they're definitely leveraging other funds, and they're able to layer quite a bit. So I would have to double check to see if any other sources have increased their amounts.
Oh, no, great. My question really is based on the need is absolutely there. I just want to see where the city is if we're upping ours, and it's not proportional to everybody else.
Yes.
Thanks.
Could you just remind us about how much total funds are dedicated to the program this year?
This year, total funds is a little bit over $800,000.
Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about and it's on slide 2, if you need to go back, but you may not. This last bullet on that slide talks about the sales price of the home and that it can't exceed 95% of the area median purchase price. Can you talk about that more in detail and actually just help us understand sort of the policy framework that we're using? And then I might have another question.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Gordon, Council President Bender. The frame behind that is that's a HUD requirement. That is that's a home rule that when you are using home funds into any project and you're using it for home ownership to sell, that the sales price cannot exceed 95% of the market median price as set by HUD. Yes.
Okay. And can we have a more stringent, I mean, I guess my question about the frame is, I mean, it seems that the intention of this policy is to limit the extent to which someone could participate in this program and then make a large profit off of the sale of the home. But I still have questions about our homeownership programs generally and whether or not we are missing an opportunity to create long-term affordability in communities that, while, yes, have had lower home prices, historically, I hear from community that there's extreme concern and stress and pressure on our entire city's housing market and a lot of interest in very long-term affordability. So my question is really coming from that angle and trying to understand if this is a case where we could look at opportunities to create more long-term affordability. But I also understand that part of this program's purpose is to help create wealth in community. So,
Thank you, Council President Bender. That's a great question. Actually, I would have to say that we do have two models that have a long-term affordability model that are currently approved developers that do use this program and do provide projects that have long-term affordability with them. So it's in there, but I understand that your question was in reference to the not to exceed 95% sales price, and I would just have to go back and do a little bit more research with what the home rules are and where we might have some room to look at that.
Hi, sorry. Councilmember Bender, something that I would add, Roxanne Young Kimball, something that I would add to what Erica just described. We are currently doing a study with the Grounded Solutions Network to look at opportunities to expand our capacity for long-term affordable housing. So as Erica mentioned, Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity and City of Lakes Community Land Trust are two long-term affordable models that are qualified through the Hal program. We are looking at ways that we can expand our capacity and our reach with long-term affordable housing.
when do we expect to have those results?
We expect to have them in December of this year.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'll just comment that every time we're approving, one of these land sales or program guidelines, I persistently have this question, and I'm not sure we really fully answered it. So I guess I would look forward to that data and those recommendations, but want to be conscious of the fact that while we are balancing these competing interests, that when we are describing programs as affordable housing programs, rather than wealth creation programs, I have a concern that we're missing opportunities to create long-term affordability in our community, especially since this program is now applying citywide. So if you use 95% of area median purchase price in neighborhoods where home prices are doubling, it's no longer an affordable housing program.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments and your question. Just to clarify, the 95% area median purchase price is set by the metropolitan statistical area, so it's not limited by neighborhood. And so there is a cap across the city that is prescribed by HUD.
That'll be very high.
Yeah, yes, okay.
You don't happen to know the median, 95% of the median purchase price, do you?
For new construction, it's a little bit over $300,000, and for rehabilitation, it's about $288,000.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get back to Councilmember Schrader's question about leverage. My understanding of this program is there are two funders, a bank or a mortgage company and us. There isn't anyone else. I mean, essentially what's happening is someone buys a lot and they build a house and it costs them $300,000 to build the house, but houses in that neighborhood are selling for $225,000. So who's gonna build a house for $300,000 if they can only sell it for $225,000? That's what the gap covers. So there's no leverage. This is all of us and the private sector. I just want to clarify that to suggest that there's some leverage somewhere. There's not. But that's the purpose of this program, and how money is really hard to spend. So, I mean, we think it's very simplistic. Just do this and do this and do this. It doesn't work that way. I mean, HUD's requirements are super strict. So this is a program in order to ensure some new quality housing for people at 80% who can get to home ownership, because that's about the level where people can own a home and have the ability to qualify for a mortgage, even if it is a lower amount. So I normally don't love these gigantic gaps, but we're talking about a little bit of this kind of program here, and we'll work with the land bank for long-term affordability there. I don't think that we have the ability actually to create long-term affordability here, because once someone sells the house, we get the loan back, and the house is no longer affordable anyway, correct?
Yes. It could be, unless it's through a long-term affordability model.
But yet, the problem is, and I would urge, the chair can feel free to do like a how funding 101 or what the requirements are for federal funds, but these are very hard funds to spend. And so I think what our staff's trying to do is figure out a way to get people who are pretty low income into home ownership in places where the houses are newer potentially, but that the market wouldn't support building a house of that size. So I think given all of those things, it makes sense to make the changes. I think the reason they're bringing this in front of us is they're trying to accommodate the comp plan requirements, that it's not just about single family anymore. It could be a duplex or a triplex, which is great. And at the same time, they're saying, hey, the reality is the cost to build things are going up, so the gap probably has to be built bigger too. So ultimately, if those are our goals, spend this HOW money, try to get some affordability for low-income tenants. This is probably the best way to do it, because you're really in front of us because you're trying to accommodate the comp plan density issues as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate those comments. I did have one other question, and you mentioned, I think there was a comment about the racial gap in home ownership. Do we know how much a difference this has made in the past in terms of that? Are we tracking those demographics so the racial disparity in home ownership?
Yes.
I know it's not maybe the number one priority that's listed in the goals of the program, but I think it is one of the things that we're working on. Do we have some data of how well we've done in that regard in the past?
We do.
Could you share that, please?
I sure can. So for our for-profit entities, the rate of sale to home buyers at or below $80,000, which is about 80% area median income, people of color, indigenous home buyers, is 70%, and this was just in 2018. And for our nonprofits, for the same, the average income was $55,000, which is approximately 60% area median income, people of color and indigenous home buyers, 83% last year.
Well, that's pretty impressive, I think. So that's great, and that it's a good result of the program. I'm not sure somebody's trying to get your attention, I think.
I don't know if it's appropriate to say anything, but I wanted to comment about the leverage piece, because there are other dollars.
Maybe, did you want to come up and make a really brief comment?
I would like to.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you,
Sure.
Chairman Gordon and the
Introduce
council
yourself.
member. AICDC is a HOW person. We're working on 3 homes right now. And so and so when you look at the leverage, it's up to the person that's looking at the end buyer to get leverage. We have 4 other pieces. We have home loan bank. We have some tribal investment. We have some other investment into it, because we're building houses that are going to cost $325,000 to build. We're selling them to people that are at 60 or 50% of area median income. And so it's up to us to our target as how we leverage those dollars. And so when we look at getting someone that we're looking at, the lower income people, into a brand new house and raising their opportunities for quality of life, it's up to us to find those other leverages. And so it's not just you and the bank. There are lots of other people involved, especially City Lake Land Trust. When you look at bringing City Lake Land Trust in, that helps with your affordability, to keep your properties affordable. And so there are other ways to monitor that and to safeguard that you have a level of affordability.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I think there's a little more discussion. Councilmember Goodman.
Yeah. Mr. Gozi, right? Oh, good, sorry, I got that right. Can you come up for a second? I'm glad you're here. So maybe you could just explain how it works. I think you have great knowledge, and you're here today, right?
Yeah.
So explain. It costs $100,000. It costs $250,000 to build a house.
More than that. It costs the same money. It costs the same dollar to build it on Minnehaha Parkway as it does in Phillips neighborhood.
So let's just use an average house that costs $300,000 to build.
Correct.
What are the sources?
The sources today are, we have, the people are qualified for a loan from a bank. Generally, they're at a low-income area, so they're qualified. We're seeing people they're qualified for a $160,000 loan. The house is going to cost $300,000. There's $140,000 of the gap, right? There's $50,000 that, and you talk about the average, the houses appraise for a dollar amount, and some of our areas, the appraisals haven't reached where the houses are at today, and so that adds to the value gap piece. So if we have a house that costs us $300,000 to build, but it only appraises for $260,000 because of the area it's in, we have a $40,000 gap there. So that's where the value gap goes in. The affordability, even at that $260,000, or the $260,000, they only get a $160,000 mortgage, so they have a $100,000 gap still there. And so those are where we have to, as a nonprofit organization, that serving a target market of lower income people, we're the ones that have to go after the dollars to bring that $100,000 so that the people can get the $160,000 mortgage and get a brand new house. And and that comes from Federal Home Loan Bank had a piece out. We have some dollars from MHFA in regards to that. We have some tribal investment dollars. We've been working with people with IRAs IDAs, and so we have some federal dollars that have been added to that. And so there are ways to bring more leverage into the deal.
So one thing, Mr. Chair, I did not get, and I'm glad Mr. Gozzi was here and could explain it, is the mortgage, you're not using your own organization to build and finance the house and then sell it to someone and finance it through a partner. You're using the actual homeowner's leverage or ability to borrow money from a bank, and that's why there's a big gap.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Correct. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think I see any other questions or comments, so I would like to move the approval of the program guidelines as presented and as recommended. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries then. Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll move on now to item number 6. This is about a contract with a Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid for legal representation to low-income Minneapolis tenants. This was a significant budget item last year, and we're ready to take some action on it. Ms. Brennan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Andrea Brennan, Director of Housing Policy and Development for the city, and I worked very closely with Danielle Shelton-Volchek in the coordinator's office on this. Danielle is not able to be here, but Trudy Jenstead from the coordinator's office is here, and also wanted to let you know that we also coordinated with Regulatory Services and the city attorney's office on this. Just briefly, I want to introduce this in a broader context. The city has established policy, strategies, and budget priorities around renter stability in the city. And this is one of several direct investments that the city is making in providing direct services for renters. So the first, this will be the third sort of direct investment, and it'll be in addition to 2 others that I'll briefly mention. One is that for the last several years, the city has a contract with Homeline to provide free legal advice, information, and resources. And this serves about 3,000 Minneapolis renters annually. So any renter in the city of Minneapolis can call Homeline and get information and referral services about their lease and their rights as tenants. Second, in 2018, the city included $150,000 in its 2018 budget to provide legal services for renters who are living in rental housing conditions where repairs are needed. So we issued an RFP, and then the council approved a contract with Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid to provide these legal services for low-income tenants living in these sorts of situations. In the 2019 City Council adopted budget includes an additional $25,000 for this, so there's $175,000 in the budget that can be used to extend this repair services contract with legal aid. So we will be back in front of you in either later in June or in July, requesting an extension to that contract and asking Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid folks to be here and to present the results so far of the work that we've engaged them to do. So today, the requested action is to expand legal representation services to low-income renters who are facing evictions in Minneapolis. Tenants facing evictions in Minneapolis are disproportionately people of color, and research shows that tenants with legal representation have much better outcomes in housing court around eviction cases than tenants that are not represented. About 10% of tenants facing evictions have legal representation, compared with about 50%, more than 50% of rental property owners having legal representation. So the scales are not exactly even. An estimated 2,700 renter households in Minneapolis face eviction without an attorney. So the proposed services are intended to expand legal services for low-income renters who are facing eviction and don't have legal representation. The 2019 budget included $650,000 for this, and it's in both the coordinator's office as well as a CPED office. So you'll see one of the requested actions is to move the budget authority that's in CPED to the coordinator's office so that we are administering one contract instead of two contracts for the exact same service. We jointly issued, CPED and Coordinator's Office jointly issued an RFP for this service, and we received two proposals. However, only one of the respondent met the requirement that the organization have a primary business purpose to provide legal representation to low-income clients. So we are recommending that the city award a contract of the $650,000 over a 2-year period to Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid for this service. And they will be partnering with the Volunteer Lawyers Network to expand the capacity and the level of service that can be provided to tenants. With these funds, Legal Aid, Volunteer Lawyers Network proposed to serve 320 low-income renters in Minneapolis. They have demonstrated a very strong track record in providing this service. In the last couple of years, they've been working on an eviction representation project that provides full representation model for eviction representation for low-income tenants, and they've had really successful outcomes for tenants in these cases. So Greg Marita and Luke Rudman and others from Legal Aid are here and can certainly answer any questions about their work. But staff recommends the award of the contract. And also, I should note, there was an adjustment or some modification to the language and the action that should have been passed out to all of you.
Thank you very much, and I believe everybody should have the amended language, which is mostly technical clarifications due to financial policy, so that our motion is consistent with those. It looks like this, if you didn't get it. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to our colleagues at Legal Aid on the work you did with us in the appeal of the Section 8 lawsuit. From where I sit, I think this is one of the more important issues of discrimination and fighting discrimination in housing through source of income. And you really went out of your way as an organization to help us with that. And I just wanted to point that out in light of the news coming today. So congratulations to us all.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm definitely very supportive of this. I just attended presentation of some research that was done about evictions in North Minneapolis, and there was definitely a clear recommendation that came through. One of the few recommendations was that there had to be more legal support and representation to people, renters who are getting evicted, and it really makes an enormous difference. And there was, they were expecting the city to step up and provide for some of that, and so I think it's wonderful that we're able to, even though we, I think, wanted to do this prior to the results of that research, but still it was significant, and this is definitely a big need that we have. And it'll be good to hear about all the benefits that we receive from it sometime in the future when we can see the results. So I think that's fantastic. Are there any other comments or questions from our colleagues? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank staff and legal aid and really all the folks in the community that are working on this issue, and particularly highlight how much the tracking of data and outcomes has really helped make the case for this funding. And I think it's something we should watch over time. We have so many competing ways that we are working toward supporting housing stability in our community, and being able to track progress helps us, I think, make those investments wisely. So I had really appreciated having a summary of the results of some of these cities and the philanthropic community's initial funding when we look to try to make this bigger investment through our budget. So look forward to hearing more of the results and really appreciate everyone's work.
Thank you very much. Well, then, on that note, I will move the amended motion having to do with the Mid-Minnesota legal aid contract that you should have before you. This will authorize a basic service agreement for a 2-year period, authorize an extension of the contract at the sole option of the city for a 1-year period in the amount not to exceed $325,000, and also pass a resolution authorizing the transfer of the $150,000 from CPAD to the city coordinator's office. On that motion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. Now we'll move on to our fourth item, which I think is some additional exciting news, and we'll let Ms. Brennan tee this one up as well. This has to do with our 4D Affordable Housing Incentive Program, and we're looking at the 2018 to 19 program results.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Dean is going to be setting this presentation up, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but I thought it was important to provide a little bit of introductory sort of context for this discussion. The city's, again, has housing policy, strategy, and budget priorities to preserve the existing affordable housing that we have in the city. More than half of low-income renters in the city of Minneapolis live in unsubsidized affordable housing. So the city has established both policy, strategy, and budget priorities to try to identify initiatives, strategic initiatives to prevent the loss of this very important housing stock, NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing stock. And we, in developing our strategies for NOAA preservation, I mean, we have surveyed all urban areas around the city, around the country, to identify best practices of how we can strategically reduce or prevent the loss of this important housing stock. And what we've learned is that there isn't one silver bullet. There's more of a potentially silver buckshot. So the best strategy is to employ multiple strategies here. And in doing this, we realized that we need things like the item that was just approved, such as direct services to renters to protect and enforce their rights. But we also learned in the NOAA preservation world that and this is partially through looking at the data of what NOAA looks like in the city of Minneapolis, where it's located, its characteristics, and devise strategies around that. So what we've done is we've developed a couple of different strategies that target these NOAA properties at the point of sale. So when they're selling, we've identified a few programs that have been piloted that we've had some initial success with to support nonprofit preservation buyers to acquire properties and preserve them. But we also recognize that not everybody is going to be selling their property. And there's a lot of smaller owner-operators of rental housing in the city of Minneapolis and before this program, we really weren't engaging with a lot of those owners outside of the regulatory function of the rental licensing that we do. So this program is really, it truly was a pilot. We did not know what kind of response we would get from this. And Dean is going to present those results. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that Dean Porter Nelson, who we're so lucky to have here, If it weren't for his sitting down and talking on the phone and meeting one-on-one and doing extensive one-on-one engagement with individual property owners here, we would definitely not have the results that we have. And also the overall sort of universe of NOAA property in the city is something less than 15,000 units. And between the 4D work and the NOAA preservation work, working with nonprofits, we hope to impact about 1,000 of those units by the end of the year. So that is not an insignificant percentage of having an impact in NOAA, and it's certainly a higher percentage than any of our peer cities are having around the country. So with that, I'll let Dean present his results.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I do really think that some of your comments about looking at data, looking at different strategies that we can take to address the challenge of NOAA preservation, that is really at the root of this program, the root of this pilot. I will also highlight that this is a different strategy than really any other city has taken to preserve NOAA, and so we should really note that this is in some ways a really exciting thing for us to be able to do here in Minneapolis. So to kind of get into the presentation, my name is Dean Porter Nelson once again, and thank you, Mr. Chair Gordon and members of the committee for having me here to present these results today. I'll be talking about the 4D Affordable Housing Incentive Program and the results from 2018 and 2019. So just a brief overview. I will do a little bit more background on 4D. I'll talk about the results of the program in general, and then I'll specifically be highlighting some of the energy efficiency and solar energy results that are part of the 4D program. So just to kind of give a little bit more overview of the program, as Andrea has highlighted, this is a NOAA preservation strategy working with existing owners. And in addition to that, I wanted to note that this is a strategy that I worked on, but was also really important in terms of collaboration between different departments in the city. And so this involved work from the assessor's office. They'll be doing work right now on the back end as we're working to certify these new properties that are going to have a different tax status. Regulatory services did quite a bit of work with me on evaluating applicants to the program. And then in addition to that, the health department was quite instrumental in working, of course, on the energy efficiency and solar energy programs. So with that in mind, really a exciting opportunity for not just CPED to do a program, but for multiple departments to engage together around the goal of preserving NOAA housing. So just to kind of go over the program requirements, we did initially approve a 4D pilot in May of 2018. In addition to that, the Housing Policy and Development Committee approved the expanded 4D program in November of 2018. And the requirements for that program, first off, require the owners of property to have a 10-year affordability declaration on their property, which is focused on preserving housing at 60% of area median income and reserving any new vacancies for tenants that are under that income cap of 60% of AMI. In addition to that, we have some eligibility guidelines to focus on housing quality, tier 1 or 2 rental housing, and housing that does not have outstanding housing orders. There are some benefits for property owners for signing this declaration. That includes 10-year eligibility for the state of Minnesota's low-income rental classification, which has in the past been typically used by subsidized housing, so low-income housing tax credits and other types of subsidized housing have used that, but this really does help NOAA owners to utilize that LIRC status. And then there is some additional assistance with administrative costs and funding for energy efficiency and solar energy projects on those 4D properties. We are going to be working with these owners on compliance by collecting tenant incomes and rents for next 10 years. And then in addition to that, owners will need to ensure that they're filling out the appropriate administrative paperwork with Minnesota Housing to maintain that tax status. So now that we've had an overview of 4D, getting into the exciting results from 2018 and 2019. So one of the, I think the highlight here is that when we look at the number of NOAA units in the city of Minneapolis, Andrea mentioned 15,000 units, and then we look at the number of units we've so far been able to preserve with 4D and to also reserve for low to moderate income families. That's 770 units, and that's an exciting number. That's a big number, and I think it's reflective of the opportunity to work with existing owners who aren't selling their property. We really do have the chance to impact a lot of units at once. And so 770 units includes both the 209 units in the 2018 pilot and an additional 561 units in the expanded 2019 program. It's also exciting to see that there were quite a few larger units, over 200 units with 2 or more bedrooms, and 59 units with at least 3 bedrooms. So that's units that are large enough for a family to occupy and are being preserved and also made available to low to moderate income families through this program. Looking at the location of units geographically, I did a couple of breakdowns. So we did one by ward and then one by neighborhood as well. And so it's we had at least one property in each city council ward. Some wards did have more units than others, just based on who applied for the program. Wards 4, 5, and 10 did happen to have the highest unit totals, at least to date. When we look at this neighborhood breakdown, we can see once again that there is very considerable geographic distribution of these affordable units. Specifically, there are 38 neighborhoods, which is 46% of all neighborhoods in the city of Minneapolis with at least one property in the 4D program. And in addition to that, it's I would note that we had 2 to 4 units, 2 to 4 unit properties were eligible for the program this year in 2019. In the past, in 2018, it was only larger properties with at least 10 units. And I think the data speaks for itself when we see that some of these neighborhoods only have a few units in them, but there are nonetheless affordable units in 38 neighborhoods, and the eligibility for these smaller buildings helped to ensure that we had a bit more geographic distribution and spread of these affordable units. Also of note, some of the neighborhoods with the most properties include Whittier, Falwell, Marcy Homes, and Elliott Park, which all had over 60 units in those individual neighborhoods. So some interesting data that we only learned because of this program is really about the median rents of some of these NOAA properties that participated in the program. I have the median rents by bedroom size here on the slide. You can note that, for example, a studio apartment is $750 a month for the median studio in the program. That's 24% below our max of $991. 2-bedroom is $950. That's 25% below that maximum. And so really across the board, these units are more affordable than our maximum levels. And so another provision of the program is that tenants who are living in these units are protected by a 6% cap on rent increases that they might experience while they're living there. That cap applies for the time that a tenant is living in a unit and ensures that they don't see a large increase all at once. So kind of what I've been talking about so far are statistics on the applications that we actually approved and enrolled in the program, and the applications were submitted to the state of Minnesota for the low-income rental classification. But I also did want to touch on what we actually initially received from owners. We did receive even more applications in 2019 than we were able to actually get to the finish line. I mentioned earlier there are 561 units that we enrolled in 2019 alone out of that 770 total. And I wanted to highlight that we had 996 units initially come in when we closed the application process in February. We were able to ultimately enroll 56% of those units in the program for 10 years, and then 41% did not enroll. I talked with a number of those owners. Some said that they weren't ready quite yet to enroll their units, but they enjoyed learning more about the program. Some of them thought that they might consider applying next year, and so this kind of highlights some of that additional pipeline that we might have for future years, and some additional interest once folks learn a little bit more about the program, and it's been around for at least a little bit more time. And I also did want to highlight that the vast majority of the applications that we received did meet those minimum Tier 1 or Tier 2 rental status requirements. We only had 29 units that we had to deny, or about 3% of the total. And I really think that's reflective of folks kind of self-sorting. I did talk to a number of Tier 3 owners. They decided not to apply for the program. And so for the most part, the applications we actually received were qualified. A few more details on the owners that this is going back to owners that actually did participate in the program. I spoke earlier about the size of the buildings and some of these smaller buildings in the program, but I also wanted to note that we had quite a few smaller owners in 2019 than we did in 2018. So in total, we've had 51 unique property owners. 43 of those were in 2019. Average owner owned 13 units, so not particularly large portfolios or large operators. And across the 2 years, we've had 129 buildings total, and 112 of those were in 2019, average size of only 5 units. 74 were 2 to 4 unit properties, so those duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes across Minneapolis. Many of those are enrolled in this program, and that once again is kind of related to that change that was made in the program to allow for those smaller units. And it's exciting to see so many smaller owners participating in this program. So finally getting into some of these energy efficiency and solar impacts of the program, which are quite significant as well. As a result of having a high volume of owners participating in this program in a lot of buildings, we are also able to have a significant pipeline of energy efficiency and solar projects. So in 2018, for the pilot, we had 3 projects for energy efficiency, and in total, that was a city cost share of about $66,000. And then in 2019, we had 13 projects that have been proposed to date. All of these are projects that have submitted an application to the city for cost share funding to the health department, and health department has approved those applications, but those projects are still in progress. Owners are still kind of working to get them done, but the funding has been approved. And so in total, we're looking at 221 in 2019, 66 in 2018 in terms of thousands of dollars of city cost share invested.
I think we have a question on this slide from Councilmember Schrader.
Sure, this is really exciting. Could you explain the numbers between 2018 and 2019 for the city cost share invested and kind of the difference in that?
Yeah, so 66,000 in 2018, 221 in 2019. Kind of the larger number, I think, is reflective of a higher number of projects and a higher volume of applications. Is that kind of what you were getting at?
It is, but I guess that isn't a satisfying answer, just because it seems we got more bang for our buck in 2018. I was wondering if there are different types of projects or just a little more detail, because it seems like a very different number.
Yeah, I think Patrick might be able to speak to that a little bit better than myself, as he's kind of directly working with this initiative. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Patrick Hanlon. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs, Chair Gordon, council members. So the $221,000 is combined, when it says cost share up there, it's actually combined with utility, the utility rebates that they provide and the cost share. And so that's the maximum amount of dollars that would be put into these projects. And then as we go through and figure out how much energy savings each of these projects can get, they can qualify for a larger and larger percentage of the rebates from the utilities. So to be a larger percentage, it's a 90% match, but it's between the cost share and between the utilities. So the utilities can provide as much as 60% match on a project, and so we would be putting in a smaller amount of money. But so those projects are still kind of in play as far as what the total match is going to be. And I should say that in 2017, I don't know the exact numbers, but the city of Minneapolis had around 33 multifamily projects that went through the combined utility program, and about 3 of those projects in the entire city went forward and did energy efficiency projects. The motivation of building owners to take advantage of energy efficiency projects, because a lot of those costs are passed on to their tenants, those investments don't tend to take place. So to get this kind of traction just with this program is really amazing, to get building owners to move forward with energy efficiency that will benefit the tenants that are in those buildings who are already going to have 10 years of affordability in their buildings.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Patrick. I think that helps us understand the funding structure a little bit better, and some of those outcomes to date in 2019. So kind of moving on to the solar energy, I understand have received reports from the health department about 2 projects which have been approved to date, and that's going to be a total cumulative investment of almost $220,000. And the city solar cost share is about $28,000. So, it seems that the owners are investing, at least on the solar projects, a fairly high percentage of that overall cost, but the city cost share is helping to move those projects forward. And so I also did want to touch on, and I think the slide seems a little bit small for folks in the audience, but I hope that the committee members are able to see this up close. This is a graphic that really helps us understand the impact on energy use of these investments in 4D cost share. So in total, we're estimating that there will be annual savings of 2.4 billion BTUs per year, about $33,000 saved on energy bills per year in these buildings, and 355,000 pounds of fewer CO2 emissions. So kind of equivalent to that would be offsetting the energy use of 25 single-family homes for a year, and then offsetting 46 U.S. cars gas use for a year. So one of those two. So you think about how many cars we're taking off the road, or how many homes energy use that we're saving just through these investments in the program. It's really, really exciting. So that kind of concludes my presentation regarding the 4D program results, as well as the energy efficiency and solar results of the 4D program. So I'm happy to take any questions or hear any comments from members of the committee.
Well, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. Council President Bender, I think, has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really excited about this program, and especially excited that we're able to bring it down to such small building size. I think it's one of the most exciting ways that we're working to preserve affordability in some of the most rapidly in the neighborhoods where housing costs are increasing the most rapidly and displacement is happening the most quickly. I wondered, when you look at the map in particular of the neighborhoods that have participated in the program, I was just curious if there's any explanation to the pattern, or if there are things that particular neighborhoods are doing to get out the word that others could learn from. I'm struck by the fact, for example, that Whittier and Lowry Hill East are so different in terms of enrollment, when the neighborhoods are very similar in a lot of other ways. Both are 90% renter by population, and both are facing increasing housing costs. So, and you talked a little bit about the barriers or the reasons people weren't following through, but I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about how council offices or neighborhood organizations or folks in the community could help support the program and help get more landlords interested or signed up.
Yeah, thank you, Council President Bender. That's an excellent point. I think just in the past, for the short time that we've had this program in existence, the units that we have enrolled in the program really are just reflective of owners that feel confident enough to sign up for the program at this time. And like I had mentioned earlier, a number of owners had reached out but ultimately decided not to participate in the program. And that would have included buildings in an even larger number of neighborhoods. You mentioned Lowry Hill East, for example. I can't specifically recall a building in that neighborhood, but there are a number of neighborhoods here that may have only a few units or no units at all that we could potentially see having units in the future. So I think a couple of things that neighborhood organizations and different council offices can support would be sharing, of course, the web link for this program. We have a simple web address of minneapolismn.org. mayors.gov/4D. So that's a pretty easy to remember website. So sharing that with different neighborhood organizations, sharing that with constituents. We did have some note cards that we sent out via mail to every property owner last year, and that helped us get a lot of leads. Not necessarily all those leads converted. It's possible we might do some similar type of outreach in the future, but when neighborhood organizations and when other community organizations can help spread the word about what the program is and how to apply, such as, filing an affordability declaration on your property or being able to submit low-income rental classification paperwork to Minnesota Housing, to be able to communicate how you do that to different owners in a neighborhood or in a ward. As one person, I talk to every single person that reaches out to me. I get back to them as soon as I can, but the more that we can help to communicate some of those details and what it means and help people, specifically help landlords or owners feel less scared about some of those requirements, then I think that will help us to have affordable units in this program in even more neighborhoods next year.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. I just want to thank you so much as the main author of the pilot and then the person moving this forward. I had no idea that it would have this level of impact. And the reason it had this level of impact is because it had one person completely passionate and hardworking to help make it happen. And I think it's a testament to you and the work that you've done, that you've been able to convert so many of the inquiries into actual program participants. It's clear when you look at this map that we could do a little bit better, but I do want to point out, I'll use my ward as an example, the two neighborhoods that have the highest levels of rental also are participating. And then I look at the wedge like Council President Bender does and wonder what the heck happened. So there's probably more outreach that we can do. The only thing I want to point out, and maybe it just comes from a place of being a little bit sad, is that all of us on this panel sat through a CPED results process that made it look like our staff did nothing for an entire year, when in fact there's all of these incredible programs, one at a time, with a whole number of staff people working on them that have seen incredible success. We can't only measure our success in housing by units built. There's a whole nother layer of things we're doing: single family, renters' rights, legal representation for renters. There's like a whole series of things that we are doing. And I understand when I asked why this information wasn't presented, I was told it was because they had to do it in a certain format. But it could have been a whole different story if this was presented as part of results, because first of all, it's more current than anything else that's happened. And two, it's a success story. And so I would urge us, prior to jumping into nothing's happening because supposedly only 48 units were built in 1 year, where we're only a partner in building those. This is something that our staff were responsible for, and they did. And 700 and some odd units means 1,000 plus people have been affected. That means we essentially, without being hysterical, saved these folks from big rent increases. That's more people than would be impacted by the entire Affordable Housing Trust Fund for a year. So it's a huge deal. And you deserve a lot of kudos. And you came on to this housing stability position and really took it on. I'm just really proud of the work that you've done. You've made the city look good. So thank you to our housing team and CPED staff, but Dean, to you in particular, congratulations. This is incredible work.
So I'm curious about when people can apply to the 4D program. Is there a certain time period, or can people start getting in applications now for the future?
Great question. So we have established an annual application process for this, and that is in many ways related to the state of Minnesota's low-income rental classification deadline that they have each year. We essentially need to get all of our applications together before, and all those declarations need to be filed and in place before a property becomes eligible. So the way that we do that is through an annual application process. Last year we opened it in November. This year I'm shooting for a little earlier, probably going to be October, just because that will enable us to probably close it a little earlier and then have more time to ensure we have all the paperwork completed. So probably going to be October to January, I would imagine.
Well, let's plan that out carefully, and let's coordinate it with council offices and communication efforts, because I think we did a pretty good job last time of pushing it out there, but we can probably do more and help. So keep us informed about that, and help us get the tools we need to communicate with our residents or neighborhood groups and however we do that, especially some of these wards that don't have as great participation as some of the others. We'll make a little competition.
Thanks, Chair Gordon. That's a great suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask, you had a slide that talked about the rent levels in the buildings, and it made me assume, are we able to track them year over year because we're asking them to comply with that 6% cap?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to that slide. So we are requiring that all the owners in this program submit an annual compliance report to the city. So if they do that once a year, part of that compliance report is, what units do you have that are enrolled in the program? What is the rent in those units? And did you have a new move-in? If they had a new move-in, then they have to list the income. If they did not have a new move-in, then we're looking at whether the rent on that existing tenant stayed within 6% of what it was last year. And so we are keeping track of that through the reporting process annually.
Thank you. I think that will be very helpful to sort of track over time. And then I wanted to ask, on behalf of my constituents, what happens after 10 years?
So that's a great question. And after 10 years, currently the declaration would expire at this time.
Do you think, I assume over time, I know we're in year 1 or 2 for most of these properties, that we'll be in communication with the property owners, that we might have some hope of being able to extend past that initial time frame, or do we anticipate that we would just be turning them back to market rents?
So I don't believe that that's been contemplated at the staff level at this time. That would be something I think would be future action.
Sure, I can jump in on that. Mr. Chair, Council President Bender, one of the things that we're really excited about with this program is we haven't really had much of a relationship with smaller rental property owner operators previously, and so we see this as an opportunity to do all, to partner in many different ways. So partner on things like the Section 8 Landlord Incentive Fund, for example, or partner on if there are other opportunities for NOAA preservation, like we could reach out to this group now, and now we have a trusted relationship, or continued, programs in energy efficiency or healthy homes or that type of thing. So that's one of the things that we're most excited about, is just really establishing that contact and positive relationship that we hope will continue to mean preservation.
I think that's really exciting. And as we learn more, I think through these relationships, I think we might learn other ideas that we could use to invest in our small local property owners, which, in particular in my ward, I know my neighborhood organizations are really interested in helping develop and build those relationships too. And so many of the policies that we're working on have to do with what property owners are doing with their property, the notification of building sale, a potential first right of refusal ordinance, our incentive programs. And so I think there's a lot of exciting potential over the next decade to build on this and really learn from it, and hopefully then, make these more permanent.
Sounds good. I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much for all the work on this and the great success of it so far. And we have 770 down and some 14,100 to go. So thank you so much. I think the only motion we need to take on this is to receive and file this report. So I will move that. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. All right, thank you, everyone, for a very interesting meeting and lots of great news. This meeting is adjourned.